Well, I'm here today to try to urge the judges and politicians and the people of Los Angeles to get attorney Richard I. Fine out of jail. He was put in there unlawfully, and he's in there with no bail and no hearing date. So he's virtually in there with no ability to get out. Without a hearing date and without bail, he could die of old age in there. I mean, we just don't know.
Relentless, probing, fearless. This is Emmy Award-winning Full Disclosure with Leslie Dutton, bringing you the truth by revealing the news behind the news.
Hello, I'm Leslie Dutton. Today on Full Disclosure, we're bringing you the news behind the news in this part 2 of our interview with disbarred attorney Richard I. Fine and with commentary from civic activist David R. Hernandez. Father's rights activist Fred Sotilli succinctly describes the circumstances that lead to the jailing of Mr. Fine, who's being incarcerated for an indefinite period of time. Why do you believe he's in there?
Well, he's in there because of retribution. He has found the judges in Los Angeles here guilty of taking a $46,000 a year bribe over the past many years, and he's exposed that fact, and the judges have admitted this by jamming a bill through the legislature a few weeks ago in a sneaky midnight session thing during the financial crisis, releasing them from responsibility for this crime and granting them immunity from it. He's decided to continue to educate the public on the fact that this is going on, and the only way they could really shut him down was by putting him in jail and throwing away the key, and that's just what they've done.
We had the opportunity to talk to Mr. Fine on the phone when he made a 911 call to us from his cell in the Los Angeles County Central Men's Jail. We asked him to give us his explanation for his predicament in the county jail.
The county is the one that's given the illegal payments to the judges, so they're the ones that are on the hook for having done the illegal payments to the judges. The judges are the ones that took the illegal payments, and my contempt order is based upon the fact that the Judge Yaffe, who's the one that issued the contempt order, is the one that took the illegal payments. So what they're trying to do, in my opinion, is they're now trying to block me from filing any type of a writ of habeas corpus in the federal court, because as soon as this writ would get to the federal court, this contempt order would be knocked out based upon the fact that a criticized judge cannot sit on a contempt hearing. And the case for that is Mayberry versus Pennsylvania, which is the United States Supreme Court case.
Mr. Fine is working hard to get a writ of habeas corpus in federal court, which would get him released and allow him to make his case before the federal court. He knows he can't get a fair hearing before any state judge. And that's where he intends to carry the fight, in federal court. He explained his strategy. We interviewed him in our studio the day before his arrest.
I filed a complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice because they violated the federal law of what is called the implied or intangible right to honest services, and that's 18 United States Code section 1346, because the case law that holds is that when a judge takes money from an individual or even a government and then does not disclose it, he violates that particular code section. And he violates it by the fact that he is not giving honest services to his employer, which is we the people or the state of California. And he's not giving those honest services because we're paying him a salary to go in and do his job as a judge. And what the judge is doing is the judge is taking money from another source to do the job, and the judge is not disclosing it because none of these judges have disclosed this money on what is called their Form 700 Statement of Economic Interest, which requires them to disclose any income from another source.
According to the California Political Reform Act, judges are required to file Form number 700, which is a statement of economic interest, to disclose any income they receive. To date, none of the Superior Court judges in Los Angeles have filed this disclosure.
And I had called the Political Reform Commission, Fair Commission on Political Reform, and I asked them about this, and they said, no, nobody's disclosing it. And then I checked on these judges. I checked on Yaffe, he didn't disclose it. And I checked on, if you look on the Form 700 on any of the 3 Supreme Court justices, they didn't disclose it. So none of these judges are disclosing this income. So consequently, they're violating the Political Reform Act, they're violating the federal law of the implied or intangible right to honest services.
Civic activist David Hernandez lost a recent case in the Superior Court. He explains how the payment from the county to the judges creates at least a perception of bias, if not outright prejudice, in the courtroom.
If I were to make a donation to a jurist based on what I believe was his great performance, whether I asked anything from him or not, if one of my relatives brought a case into that court, he would have to recuse himself. What's the difference between receiving a bonus from the County of Los Angeles and then sitting and making decisions and rulings from the very entity that is giving you the money? So what it does is it really creates the perception that there could be an unbiased or a lack of unbiased ruling on the part of the judge.
Yeah. They're violators. They're violating a criminal law. Now, that is a reason why the legislature gave them immunity. It's the reason why the Judicial Council wrote that immunity in, because the Judicial Council knew that they couldn't save them from the federal law violations, but at least they could save them from the state law violations.
The allegation that our judges are taking bribes is a dangerous accusation. Most people want to believe that there is one branch of government that is supposed to be free and above political influence. It is disheartening to hear that it is biased and tainted by greed.
The cost to our system of governance by allowing anything to create that perception of a biased or of a partial jurist is far greater than any one particular case or any one particular issue. The issue that we dealt with was, like I said, specifically a constitutional issue. The ramifications of that were that we just went through an election cycle where you have city council members that are now in office for another 4 years based on the decision that was made that day in Judge Yaffe's court. So the ramifications of that, it's kind of like the domino effect, is that where does that one decision lead? And then you look at where the direction the city is going in. And that's why anything that causes that lack of faith and confidence in our system needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed very quickly.
For the news behind the news, wherever and whenever you want it, go to fulldisclosure.net and get programs on topics affecting you, weekly updates and alerts on hot topics, video streaming of Full Disclosure episodes. It's award-winning, hard-hitting, corruption-fighting news coverage. And it's only available at fulldisclosure.net. Fulldisclosure.net, the news behind the news.
Welcome back to Full Disclosure and our interview with jailed former attorney Richard I. Fine. In our interview with him the day before his arrest, Mr. Fine explained how the County of Los Angeles is not entitled to bribe judges any more than you or I.
The County of Los Angeles, as far as being a party to a lawsuit, is the same as you or I. You know, just because they're the County of Los Angeles, it doesn't make them any different from you or I, because the employer of the judges is the state of California. And this is where a lot of people seem to get confused. They seem to think that because it is the county, that the county seems to have some sort of a right to be able to pay the judges. The county doesn't have any more right to pay the judges than you or I.
Aren't government agencies supposed to be able to influence other government agencies through lobbying or bonuses?
The County of Los Angeles is a subdivision. It is an independent entity. and it is not a governing branch of the state. So consequently, when the county comes into court, it comes in the same way that you or I come into court. And so the county does not have any rights with respect to anything in the state system. And in fact, as a litigant, the county never did have any rights greater than you or I.
If an ordinary citizen or a businessman offered a bribe to a judge, they'd be carted off to jail just as quickly as Mr. Fine was. How about the county officials who are authorizing these payments? Are they above the law? Are the supervisors liable?
The answer to that question is yes. According to, interestingly enough, according to the immunity that was given, the immunity goes to the government entity, which the immunity goes to the county, and the immunity goes to the government employees and government officials. So the immunity actually went to the county and it went to the supervisors.
Is that possible that they could get away with this?
Well, the answer is yes. They have gotten away with it. Now, there might be some questions as to whether under the United States Constitution you can grant immunity, for past, whether a state can grant immunity for past acts, but the state is only granting immunity under the state's powers. Remember, this immunity is not going to any United States law. It is only dealing within the state.
Mr. Fine points out that citizens of Los Angeles County who have been involved in litigation against the county in Superior Court have had their constitutional rights violated by the judges who failed to disclose receipt of these illegal payments from the county.
You as a litigant still have your rights, your First Amendment rights to petition the government to redress grievances is still existing, and in fact, that right has been infringed upon. And your 14th Amendment right to due process has been infringed upon.
That means thousands of cases heard by these judges are now suspect. As Mr. Fine explains, they could be vulnerable as a result of the non-disclosure of the illegal payments.
Every case in which one of these judges has ruled against you as an individual, or you had a problem with the county, can now actually be overturned because of the fact that they've legislated this immunity and they've given them immunity for this bad act or for this illegal act. We have what is known as a writ of coram nobis. And the writ of coram nobis says is that if there's a new fact that has come in to show that what's happened with the case, you can now come in and say, look, I want my case overruled and I want my case redone. So that is a side effect of this legislation. For every person that had a case that went bad under one of these judges, come in on the writ of coram nobis and ask to have the case reheard.
And it's not just here in Los Angeles County. According to Mr. Fine, due to the passage of the immunity legislation in the February budget bill, this corruption has infected almost the entire state.
So 3 of the 7 associate justices of the California Supreme Court are tainted. You then have the tainting going to the Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court, Justice George, who's the chairman of the Judicial Council, who wrote the bill, and Justice Baxter, who is the chairman of the committee of the Judicial Council that wrote the bill. So we end up with 5 of the justices of the California Supreme Court who are tainted. Now you ask, why are these people tainted? Because another thing that happened is that this bill is personal to the judges. This bill is not helping the judicial system of California. This bill says that all of these judges can continue getting the money, which is personal to them because the money goes from the county to the judge. It doesn't pass through the state of California. It's personal money going from the county to the judge, and it gives immunity, personal immunity, to all of these people. So what the Judicial Council did is the Judicial Council took our public money and wrote a bill for the personal benefit of these individuals. Then the Judicial Council spent our public money on its lobbyist to go in and lobby for this bill. So you have the tainting of these two Supreme Court justices. So effectively, 5 out of the 7 Supreme Court justices at this point in time are tainted by this action.
Oh my gosh, if it wasn't illegal for the judges to get the extra cash, then why did the legislature pass the immunity legislation? The very act seems to incriminate everybody involved. So the legislature itself has basically condemned them as guilty.
Absolutely. They condemned them as being guilty by, one, saying that the payments were unconstitutional, and by affirming the decision of the Sturgeon decision, and then by going through and taking the second step and giving them immunity.
Now, when you say immunity, are we talking about retroactive?
Retroactive immunity. The immunity is retroactive all the way up to the, as it says in the bill, the effective date of the bill. And the effective date of the passage of the bill was February 20th, 2009.
So the judges are immune from being prosecuted for receiving illegal funds in the past. We asked Mr. Fine, now that they've made it all legal, is there a problem going forward from this point on?
These judges who are sitting in office today are still biased, because the money that they got up to February 20th from these counties is biasing them for any decision that they make on February 21st. So basically, every judge that is dealing with a decision of a county on February 21st is being influenced by the money that he got or she got on February 19th. So we do not have an unbiased judiciary in the state of California at the present time, with the exception of the judges who did not receive the money.
Are there any?
Yes. That's, once again, that's Yolo County, Mendocino County, and San Francisco County, and any judge that might be sitting on the California Supreme Court or on the Court of Appeal that did not receive this money. That is what is left in the California judicial system at the present time.
What our legislators have done is they created a bill which covered up the crimes that our judges have done. Because if you read the bill down in paragraph 5, they admit that even though they took the money when it was unlawful to do so. So what they've done, they've admitted that they are now corrupt.
In the government, there's a phrase used to restrict access to information. That phrase, need to know. At fulldisclosure.net, we want you to have all the information you need to be an informed citizen, unlimited access to all the information we've gathered on our TV show. And if you can't watch us on your local cable station, streaming video of complete shows when you want them. Fulldisclosure.net, when you need to know the news behind the news.
Welcome back to Full Disclosure and our interview with Richard I. Fine. As of this moment, Mr. Fine has been in jail for 5 weeks with no bail, no release date, no prospective hearing in the future. And all of his improper rights have been denied. As he languishes in jail, it's up to others to stand up on his behalf. Activist David R. Hernandez isn't shy about speaking out.
The fact is, everyone who participated in this policy was well aware that they were violating the state constitution. And it is now more apparent than ever, because by them inserting the immunity clause for themselves, as well as the judges, they are saying, well, look how upfront we're being and putting it on the table, but over here, sorry, we've closed the door on our past behavior. Well, unfortunately, that is what the grave impact is to our system of governance.
Mr. Hernandez is critical toward the government institutions that are not following the rules laid out by our state and federal constitutions.
So it seems like It doesn't matter if it's unconstitutional or not. It matters whether or not you get caught. And if someone starts turning the light of day, like what Attorney Fine has been doing on this, now it's in the damage control mode. Look how upfront and honest we are by putting it on the table, but because we've been violating your constitutional rights, and what people have to remember, and what people that are watching this broadcast have to remember, they're not violating some document in Sacramento. They're violating your constitutional rights. Those rights were put there to protect you, your family, your community, and your city. And so when you hear about the violation of the Constitution, don't be thinking about some document in some museum in Sacramento. This is about the very rules and regulations that allow you to be in a country that is unlike so many others. And when there is an affront to that, we see what happens. All we have to do is look 20 feet past San Diego. There is a reason that the Marines can't even go into Tijuana anymore for R&R, because you have systems like this that have been allowed to be taken to the extreme. And what we have here is a system that's already on that path. And when they get caught, they do damage control and give themselves immunity.
This practice bodes ill for the future of our judiciary and our country.
And I don't know where this is going to end up, because we do not have anyone that I see in a position of authority or with resources enough to set us back on course. Shows like yours, I mean, we have limited resources. There are things we can do. We can do what we can to raise the awareness, but to challenge these individuals through the judicial system. I mean, there's a reason Attorney Fine is sitting in jail. There's a reason that most cases are lost, is because you're going against unlimited resources, and now for individuals that were supposed to be impartial, yet now we see that they are, through a violation of the Constitution, they are receiving a financial reward. That's smacks of some other country.
We asked Mr. Fine what can be done to remedy the situation. How can our government possibly deal with this when it's so widespread?
Well, it's very simple. I mean, it's just like dealing with a single judge that took a bribe. So here we're dealing with maybe 1,600 or 1,700 judges. You know, the number doesn't really make that much difference. You know, it's the same violation. The legislature has already said that the violation occurs, so you go in and just prosecute the people.
Prosecute the people. As he claimed from his jail cell, this problem is like a cancer corrupting the entire state system.
Right now, one part of our government, the state of California, is not functioning, and that is the judiciary. And with a non-functioning judiciary, that has affected everyone across the board. We have approximately 40 million people in California, and 40 million people in California have not received justice. We have children that have been wrested away from their parents because of the fact that the judges have received money from the counties. The county child services who take these children away have received money from the counties, and the judges have approved that. So all these children that have been separated from their parents, and done so in cases where the judges have received illegal monies. We have situations where people's homes have been taken by eminent domain, by judges, money from the counties, and the counties who want the homes for eminent domain. We have people that have been involved in cases with the counties. Same thing. Judges receive illegal money from the county, and the county is the one that is being sued.
Mr. Fine wants citizens to get involved in the fight. He's optimistic that more civic participation can turn the tide on this judicial corruption.
And imagine what could have been done with all the money that went to those judges across the state of California to make the lives of we the people in California better. So therefore, I'm saying contact your senators, contact your congresspeople. let's have these judges indicted because they have immunity, but they did not have the decency to resign from their jobs. California lawyers who've been afraid to speak up and do the right thing for their clients, which they are obligated to do under the oath that they took when they became a lawyer, to now have the courage to go forward and do that. And the final thing is that the reason for it, because it is the right thing to do.
The right thing to do. Mr. Fine is standing firm on principle and is paying the price for that stance.
I have done what is the right thing to do, and the state bar and the judges have persecuted me for it, thrown me in jail for it, kept me under 24-hour lockdown, and done all these things to me, and they're trying to take away my living because of that. I and the people are doing the right thing. It is now time for us to do the right thing and get rid of these people. Spread the word, disseminate the word, because it is only if we, the people, get out there and do what we are supposed to do, and if we do the right thing, that we will get rid of this massive corruption.
The motivation for his call to action isn't only principle. He advocates we correct the situation to protect the future of our justice system.
And has deprived us of one of our basic liberties, and that right to have an honest judiciary. We have been deprived of this right for 20 years, and now is the time to bring an honest judiciary back to California, to get out from under this black cloud.
We want to thank former attorney Richard I. Fine and civic activist David R. Hernandez for appearing on Full Disclosure. Mr. Fine and his family have made numerous appeals to the ACLU of Southern California to assist in his efforts in federal court. The judge has denied Mr. Fine's improper rights, and he has no attorney. And the ACLU claims they don't have the resources to help him. We want to know what you, the viewers, think. Do you think you could count on the ACLU to help you when confronted with judicial corruption? Please call our Full Disclosure Town Hall number at 1-800-867-7777. That's 1-800-867-7777, and leave your name and number, and we'll get back to you. Or you can log on to our website at fulldisclosure.net and leave your opinion there. And if you leave your email address, we'll be happy to respond. I'm Leslie Dutton. Please join us next time for another edition of Full Disclosure. Thank you.
To respond to this question or comment on this program, please call 800-867-7777 or visit fulldisclosure.net. Transcripts or DVD copies of this program are also available on our website. Full Disclosure, the news behind the news.
On June 7th, the Los Angeles Times published an article about prominent antitrust attorney Richard I. Fine, who has now served over 100 days of coercive confinement in the Los Angeles County Men's Central Jail. Once again, the Times has missed the mark, ignoring critically important news about the corrupt judiciary that sent him there. Instead, the reporter trivialized the issue as a mere human interest story. Is the Times complicit in the corruption and covering it up? Or are they merely denying that the issue is an important public concern? Find out next on Full Disclosure.
Relentless, probing, fearless. This is Emmy Award-winning Full Disclosure with Leslie Dutton, bringing you the truth by revealing the news behind the news.
Hello, I'm Leslie Dutton. Today on Full Disclosure, we're bringing you the news behind the news in this part 5 of our series on judicial benefits and court corruption. Richard I. Fine accused the Los Angeles Superior Court judges of taking illegal payments from LA County. As a result, he was handcuffed and carted away to jail on March 4th, sentenced to an indefinite period of coercive confinement for contempt of court. Several of his supporters were interviewed by the Los Angeles Times reporter for hours, and only to have their input discounted or simply ignored. We interviewed two of those people and asked them why they thought the Times disregarded what they said during the interviews.
But the Times happens to be a very big company, and their job is to report the news, and they're not quite doing the job they should have, and this is part of it, this thing with Mr. Fine. They make it a human interest story when it's really a story that should be really delved into and uncovered. It's the collapse of our judicial system, just like the collapse of Congress, just like the collapse of the president. We have a collapse in this country of our judicial system. It has become corrupt.
We all know that mainstream media now is a tool of the government. There's not even a discussion point on that. We know that. And Richard Fine's case, his actions, his stance, everything that he stands for in this thing is very, very damaging to the judiciary, not only in California, but really to the whole country. This is why his case is now being taken to the Supreme Court. And we believe that the powers that be have directed this newspaper to make sure that they have the appearance of reporting without actually getting down to the real reality. And the real reality is real simple. There are facts here. This money is paid. These judges take it. They don't declare it. And they rule against you. And there's no appeal when they do this. The appeals are denied. The appeals are, the appeal is to the same people. You appeal to the same people, that were corrupt to begin with. So you're done.
We asked John Rizzo what he told the reporter during his hour-long interview.
And I told her our relationship with Mr. Fine and how we had filed a suit and how Mr. Fine used to stay at meetings, the last one to leave, and he'd be in a parking lot talking to people, how he was a brilliant man, how it was difficult to find someone to do the case. In fact, very, very difficult. It took us years and years and years to find someone to do the case, how difficult it was, how other people wouldn't do these kind of cases because they're too much a part of the system and this is attacking the system. I told her all this stuff, and she picked out that I'm a tired old man. Well, I'm not tired enough to give up the fight.
Fred Sotilli was irritated by the way the reporter marginalized the people supporting Mr. Fine.
It made it appear as a small and fragmented group, or a small and disregardable group, a group that you really didn't have to consider, and in reality, when you go in the blogosphere and you see the amount of people with these same complaints, the same comments, when you post something and you get dozens and dozens of letters in support and virtually none in opposition, you know you're on the right track. You know something's wrong, you're not alone, and it's the time you have to stand. All the people do. The court is supposed to be the people's court, our court. The judges are supposed to work for us. In reality, they have a business going there, and we're the victims of that.
John Rizzo is skeptical that the LA Times will be able to exonerate themselves once Mr. Fine is released and gets real justice.
I think it's going to lead to ultimately, when Mr. Fine is found to be the victim instead of a perpetrator on the courts, he's going to find to be a victim of the courts and of a corrupt court system. Then they're going to have to do the real reporting. And I wonder then, they're so tied in with the system, if they're going to be able to give the people what the people really should hear. Not maybe what they want to hear, but what they should hear about all the corruption that is going on in our courts.
Mr. Sotilli is amazed that the LA Times is totally ignoring the real story: blatant judicial corruption.
We accept a certain amount of let's say, professional courtesy from these people with each other. But ultimately, it can't manifest itself in continuously repeated, blatant abuse. I mean, the situation now is so over the top and so out of hand. There's so much evidence, so much proof. It's so blatant. It's so blatant that the judges themselves admitted they were doing wrong by taking this money, because last February they said, wow, they caught us taking the money. Let's quick enact a law giving us immunity against taking money. And they had a lobbyist real quick write up some legislation. They got the Assembly to sign it, the Senate to sign it, and the governor to sign it in 6 days. They did this in the heart of our financial crisis here. We had a no budget, and we have a gigantic budget gap in California. So while they were having overnight sessions where these guys are supposed to be focused on this budget issue, here these judges got this immunity stuffed through real quick, you know, and then they announced it. They came right out that day and announced it. They said, well, with this new law, you can stop going after us because we're immune. Anyway, see you in court.
To Mr. Rizzo, this is just part of the corruption endemic throughout Los Angeles.
Unfortunately, the Times is, how do I want to put it, part of the mainstream power structure. And they have gotten, the mainstream power structure has become more and more and more corrupt. And the Times, although it has not become more and more corrupt, what it has done is, because it's mainstream, is sort of not reported enough on the corruption.
According to Mr. Rizzo, the LA Times was targeting the wrong man.
They're out to discredit Mr. Fine. Instead of this going after the courts, which are corrupt, they're discrediting the messenger. In other words, discredit the messenger that brings the evidence, and don't go after the criminal act. I told Mr. Fine, I says, you're a noble man doing a noble fight. And I indicated that to the reporter. And all comes out of it as I'm a tired old man.
In the government, there's a phrase used to restrict access to information. That phrase, need to know. At fulldisclosure.net, we want you to have all the information you need to be an informed citizen, unlimited access to all the information we've gathered on our TV show. And if you can't watch us on your local cable station, streaming video of complete shows when you want them. Fulldisclosure.net, when you need to know the news behind the news.
Welcome back to Full Disclosure and our series on judicial benefits and court corruption. On June 8th of this year, the United States Supreme Court, in the case of Caperton versus Massey, determined that a judge who has received campaign contributions from a litigant must disqualify themselves from hearing that case. Being the news behind the news, we asked Robert Gerstein to explain this decision and how it applies to all judges. Mr. Gerstein is a prominent appellate attorney and emeritus professor of political science at UCLA. Following the original release of this program, Full Disclosure was contacted by Mr. Gerstein, who wrote, I was not aware that my interview would be placed in the context of the Fine case. I certainly cannot endorse your opening comments in the video about a corrupt judiciary. Under the circumstances, I do not wish to participate further. End of quote.
The decision is certainly a very interesting one, and it arises from what seems to be a rather extraordinary situation. There was a case in court in West Virginia in which a $50 million verdict was awarded against a coal company. That coal company's president then proceeded to put $3 million into the campaign of a particular candidate for the West Virginia Supreme Court. This was happening while the appeal was pending from this $50 million verdict. The candidate, supported by the president of the coal company, won. And the Supreme Court, by a divided vote, including the candidate who had won, on the side for reversing the decision, reversed the decision.
And so the judge who got the $3 million campaign contribution was part of the majority to decide in favor of the coal company. Then the U.S. Supreme Court stepped in.
The question in the Supreme Court was whether this decision violated the due process rights of the plaintiffs who had won this $50 million judgment. The answer the Supreme Court gave 5-4 was yes, due process was violated here. They talked about a situation in which, given human nature, the circumstances would offer a possible temptation to the average judge to lead him not to hold the balance nice, clear, and true. That's language from an old decision of the United States Supreme Court, which dealt with a much clearer kind of a situation in which you had a judge who had an immediate material interest in the outcome of the case.
We asked Mr. Gerstein to give us an example of what he meant by an immediate material interest.
You have a judge deciding on traffic tickets where the judge is going to get a percentage of all the fines. That is clearly unacceptable. Well, the majority of the Supreme Court, in this case, Justice Kennedy writing for the court, concluded that you have that same kind of temptation here. That a person who was just elected to a state Supreme Court, who got $3 million to help him along in that election from a party to a pending case, was going to find it very difficult not to be grateful to that large contributor to his cause.
We asked Mr. Gerstein what effect this decision was going to have on future cases. Especially important, how will this decision be interpreted by lower courts?
And that was the great bone of contention between the majority and the dissenters. The majority said, this is a very extreme case. And basically, I think they were saying was, look, we just can't let this go by. This is clearly wrong. This is clearly unacceptable. One of the things the Justice Kennedy said was, we're not too concerned about a flood of litigation about this because the first line of defense against this kind of injustice is not really the due process clause. The due process clause of the federal Constitution is kind of backstop for extreme cases. But the first line of defense is the canons of ethics of the judiciary. And judges in every state have their canons of ethics. They have their ethical rules. And those rules, the court said in general, are very protective of the rights of litigants. That is to say, require judges to recuse themselves voluntarily in any case that gets anywhere near the line.
We asked Mr. Gerstein to explain the canons of judicial ethics and how they're supposed to restrain a judge from sitting on a case where they have an immediate material interest.
Judges are called upon to recuse themselves in any case where they feel that they may somehow be compromised or appear to be compromised. You know, that they've got to stay, as I say, far from that line.
So the majority of the U.S. Supreme Court believed that judges would censor themselves. And because of their superior ethics, they would disqualify themselves in any case that gets anywhere near the line, as Mr. Gerstein claims. These justices trusted the court officials around the country to monitor themselves so that there wouldn't be a slew of new cases being appealed up the chain of courts.
The majority's position was, this is not going to cause a large amount of litigation. It's not going to have to be interpreted very extensively by the lower courts unless some really extreme, extraordinary cases like this come along in future. The dissenters, on the other hand, said, that, and this is roughly quoting Chief Justice Roberts, there are some cases where the cure is worse than the disease. Now, what the majority has done here is take care of one extreme case, but they have created a precedent which is going to cause a flood of litigation. You're going to have all kinds of people raising the issue in court of whether a judge should have recused himself or herself, and whether there's a violation of due process, because what they've done is create this broad general standard, whereas before you only had two limited circumstances where the United States Supreme Court had said that due process would be violated by a judge sitting on a particular case. That would be where the judge had an immediate material interest and where the judge was determining whether to punish somebody who had directly insulted the honor of his or her court.
Although Mr. Gerstein told Full Disclosure he was not aware of the Fine case, we posed a hypothetical situation of Mr. Fine's circumstances where Judge Yaffe sentenced Mr. Fine after Mr. Fine asked him to disqualify himself for taking the illegal payments. Judge Yaffe refused. Mr. Gerstein gave us what he considered a violation of the due process law. Would it be proper for that judge to sit or preside over the contempt proceedings?
Well, in general, as I say, it is in fact a violation of due process. This is one of the established bases for saying that a judge can't sit on a particular case because it would be a violation of due process of law. The case in which the judge is going to punish with contempt someone who has made a direct contempt against that judge. That's a case in which the judge cannot sit. That's quite clear.
In a hypothetical case like this, he suggested that someone in Mr. Fine's circumstances would have no problem getting the contempt ruling overturned in the next higher court.
If you had a case in which a judge held someone in contempt and did the kind of thing that we're talking about here, presumably you could get that overturned quite readily on appeal.
Mr. Gerstein wouldn't comment on the basis of Richard Fine's charges that the LA Superior Court judges were taking illegal payments by continuing to receive $46,000 every year from LA County. But he did agree in principle that it was illegal for judges to receive extraneous money from people or groups that were litigants in their courts. Judges are prohibited from receiving money from other than their employers, isn't that correct?
Well, I think that's generally true, certainly, and that seems a much clearer case than this one. I mean, if you're talking about judges actually directly receiving money from parties who are interested in cases before them, that just has to be the clearest kind of wrongdoing from this perspective. I don't think anybody would have any problem with that. I mean, we're talking there about outright bribery, aren't we?
But in the LA Superior Court, that doesn't seem to matter. They are still receiving money from LA County that the case of Sturgeon versus the County of Los Angeles ruled was illegal. And now they have a state law protecting them from criminal prosecution. Fred Sotilli paraphrased comedian Jeff Foxworthy when he said,
If you have immunity to crime, you might be a judge. Yeah.
For the news behind the news, wherever and whenever you want it, go to fulldisclosure.net and get programs on topics affecting you. Weekly updates and alerts on hot topics, video streaming of Full Disclosure episodes. It's award-winning, hard-hitting, corruption-fighting news coverage. And it's only available at fulldisclosure.net. fulldisclosure.net, the news behind the news.
Welcome back to Full Disclosure in our series on judicial benefits and court corruption. Even though it wasn't disclosed in the article by the LA Times, it is now known and accepted that the LA Superior Court judges are continuing to receive money from LA County that has been ruled illegal. The U.S. Supreme Court has rendered a decision that judges must not get near the line of impropriety when it comes to receiving money from interested parties. But what are we, the citizens who rely on the courts for justice, supposed to do? These judges have to stand for election every 6 years. John Rizzo is adamant that people wake up and take care of the problem at the ballot box.
Vote out the people that are not serving the public and realize the fact that the old way was the corrupt way. And I think they realize that, or are starting to realize it, and get a little more involved, get a little more interest, get a little more into the system. Try just doing a little something. People like myself, I've been to 4,000 meetings on one issue. Go to a couple meetings, write a letter, call up your congressman, send an email to them, send an email to the district attorney. God, if he got 1,000 emails from, he'd probably investigate anything. I doubt if he gets any emails saying, would you mind investigating this? Or the judges are wrong. I doubt if he got any emails on this. I doubt if the attorney general does. It doesn't take many people. With a few, we've gotten the message out. With Mr. Fine acting as a match, we've lit a candle. Now, with the candle, we need somebody to turn on the lights.
Fred Sotilli is a little more circumspect. He is suggesting that Mr. Fine's case is the measure for the health of our entire judicial system.
There are two things that can happen. One of the things is that someone with integrity can step forward and get him out of there and begin to study his case. That's one scenario. The other scenario is they can laugh at us all and throw away the key. And if they do that, it means a real lot to me. I didn't know Mr. Fine until a few months ago, but it's been my contention that nobody has recourse in the courts, and that's been my contention because my problem was with family court. And family court is never going to help me. They really aren't. And if they don't, Richard Fine is not a regular guy like me. He's a special person. He is a doctorate in law, and he's done international treaty law. He's really a special lawyer. He's not just a regular guy in a phone book, and Department of Justice and for decades, you know. And if they can mistreat and abuse him and get away with it, and he doesn't have a friend, and all these other lawyers are too afraid of the Bar Association to stand up, none of these judges will stand up. If Richard Fine can't get, you know, what he deserves as a citizen and what he deserves as a man with his credentials, if he can't, then I know I and all these other family law people certainly never can, because we don't have any of that kind of power, and we don't have any of that kind of knowledge or experience or anything. And to me, if they don't do the right thing by him, we're all done. Now, that's my personal statement about the family law, but this extends to all forms of government. In other words, when you're going for a building permit, you've got no chance of a fair deal. When you go for a license, for say you want to have a license to be a chiropractor, and you've done all the steps, but they just don't want to give you the license, and you go to court, and the court just says, "Nah, we're not hearing your case. We don't care." And, you know, if the court gets to where they do everything by who pays them, you know, if they just rule according to directives from, you know, big money groups like the Bar Association or the AMA or the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, if they start to just take money from them and make rulings based on their agendas, then no people nowhere ever can get a fair deal. And I think this entire story rests on Fine. He's the one. To me, he's the pivot man or the, you know, the center of this whole thing. If he can't get fairness, then I'm certain no one can. You know, and I think that it's the turning point for the whole country. The whole country then, it's simply you have to bribe the judge to get a ruling. That is it. And if you didn't bribe the judge, which you can in LA because it's legal now, they can accept the bribes. They just passed the law. But if you can't bribe the judge, you're going to lose. So court becomes a tool of big business, a tool of big government, a tool of special interest groups that fund that court. And this is what's at stake for America, for the whole country, for every aspect of law.
Now is the time, though, that something may be done, and if it is done, it'll be on the backs of people like Richard Fine, who have to go to jail in order to bring attention to this and fight the times, fight the courts, fight the system to bring attention to this.
We want to thank John Rizzo and Fred Sotilli and Appellate Court Attorney Robert Gerstein for appearing on Full Disclosure. We want to know what you, the viewers, think. Is there a difference between payments to judges from private parties and payments from public entities? And do you think the $300 million paid illegally by Los Angeles County to the LA Superior Court judges has influenced the decisions of the judges in the cases involving the county? Please call our Full Disclosure Town Hall number at 1-800-867-7777. That's 1-800-867-7777. And if you leave your name and number, we'll get back to you. Or you can log on to our website at fulldisclosure.net and leave your opinion. And if you leave your email address, we'll be happy to respond. I'm Leslie Dutton. Please join us as we continue to examine the American justice system on Full Disclosure. Thank you.
To respond to this question or comment on this program, please call 800-867-7777 or visit fulldisclosure.net. Transcripts or DVD copies of this program are also available on our website. Full Disclosure, the news behind the news.